Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth and logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth, study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology. Myth means a lie, fake, or imagination. Mythology means a study or science of fake, lie, or imagination. Do not call Ramayana and Mahabharata as mythology. Do not call Puranas as mythology because Purana may not have stories from Earth, but there are stories of other planets. And also the Veda is Americans are very scared of aliens, but unidentified flying objects also, UFOs. But guess what? Not a single American plane has been able to shoot down a UFO because they're too fast. So the reason is Vedas have always given information from other galaxies also, and within the same galaxy, multiple planets. And I'm just quoting Veda. So if you want to verify, research is your work. I'm the information guy here. I'm just repeating what is mentioned there. But today we are taking a step further in continuation of last discussion, but it's important. Not only Veda gives you rights, but they also give you responsibilities. And it is for us to choose the right thing. I have a very famous Rishi Muni, pracharak, and researcher, and also a person who stands for truth. I would call him a Sattologist, whether he likes it or not, but I'll call him Sattologist. And it's opposite of mythologist. There are some people claim to be mythologists publicly, and some people, in the name of Indology, spread mythology. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaskar, Aditya ji. So, in all humbleness, Manita, I accept all the titles given by you. But I also want one more title that you gave it to me, but today you did not reiterate, which is Pandit.
Pandit.
Okay. So yeah, with all the titles, and I think some people even don't get the humor of it. I mean, you mean it sincerely, but other people start asking you sometime in the comments to the YouTube, which is a kind of fun but also boring to read. Is like, why are you calling so and so with these names? I think that when you call somebody because it comes to you, you feel like calling. Isn't it interesting that sometime when you meet someone, a great learned individual, a very knowledgeable individual, acharya type of personality, and we internally feels like I should go and do namaskar to that fellow. Okay, when growing up, I used to tell my parents, like, we are going someplace, and of course they were trying to do the samskar. So they would say, oh, please go, and not, they won't say please. Now when I'm translating it in English, it comes out as a please. There is no please, as you can relate. They will say, okay, go and touch that person's feet, and go and touch that person's feet. And I used to do that, but I did not like it in this sense. As a practice, it is good, but before I touch somebody's feet, I should feel that reverence towards that person too. I need to know why, what is so great about that person. But there are times when you don't know, and I have this experience many times. You know very little about that individual, or sometimes you know nothing. But it's like a first sight. You meet, you just see that person, and you feel like touching that person's feet. It's as simple as like, seeing a beautiful vista in front of you and you loving it, or seeing a beauty of any kind, a flower or anything, and just you get enthralled by it. Today we'll talk about the rights versus responsibilities. Sorry, go ahead.
No, whatever I say, I speak from my heart, number one, and I mean it. Because you have really done a lot of research, and this is what Pandita Samadarshina. So Pandit, which he sees everyone equally. And what I like really is that you keep your focus on Shastra. You don't go out of it. This is what is all about. Like if we reject Vyasa, if we reject Valmiki, if we reject any other Shadbringa Rishi, Sudikshana Muni, Agastya Muni, all of these are our ancestors, and if we reject any of them, then what is the purpose? What we are doing it for? Yeah. And also one more thing is that Vinay, Vinamrata comes in. Now, Vinamrata has a very unique definition. to not be anxious for the satisfaction of being honored by others.
Hmm.
And this is humility, because humility doesn't mean that I may bend down very humbly and then pull your feet and then you'll fall. That
Yeah.
is not humility. So generally, like, people think that somebody just bowing down and g, but behind the back they are talking all kinds of nonsense. That
Yes.
is not humility. That is pakanda.
Yeah.
But and we generally see in the name of scholarship, a lot of this kind of actions go on. That the scriptures are written by Vyasa, scriptures are written by other great rishis, and we are trying to research it for our better understanding also.
Correct.
And why, in that process, if somebody else learns, that is a great addition. What do you
Yes.
say to say on that?
Yes, no, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I will add in the way of you use the word vinamrata. So the word vinamrata comes from vinaya or many other words, namra and vi in a sense of a vishesha. Similarly, vinaya, we also typically translate that as to mean humbleness or vinamrata, which is true. Uh, there is a subhashit which says vidya vinayena shobhate, right? What is interesting is the vinaya also means vidya. The vinaya also means jnana. It has become also means proper intellect. It also means proper comprehension. To the extent the proper comprehension, proper intellect, proper knowledge, prajna, jnana has become synonymous with a vinaya, because I mean, vinaya itself means that, but the person who has a true knowledge will naturally be humble. Now that humbleness gets misunderstood too, because if some person is doing some stupidity, that humble person will be very sharp in explaining to that person what nonsense he or she is doing. And they say, oh, how come he's arrogant? No, he's not arrogant. He just trying to get rid of the nonsense in you. That's why we listen to all the great acharyas, okay, and many swamis and all of those through the times. You will find when required they are very sharp. I mean, someone as kind as Santa Eknath. If you read his
Great example.
Abhangas, when required, he's using very sharp language. Yeah, and then his softness comes at the end. So, for example, it says Nana mate pakhanda karmatata atibanda thetsane tayanse tonda thetsane tayanse tonda, which means literally smash their mouths. And but very interestingly, his natural tendency comes back and says Hari Bhajane with the Hari Bhajan. How interesting is this? So rights and responsibilities. And so my thought about that is, when people do not comprehend in the right fashion, that is also the responsible for that avinamrata. Okay, and that's when the ego comes up. They try to put their personality, which is a pseudo personality, okay, the outside covering, ahead of their knowledge, and that's why they fall on their face. Okay.
No, many places the acharyas, even Shukdev Goswami, even in Bhagavad Puran, Vaishampayan in Mahabharata, they are very straight. I mean, it may sound some in today's world, you'll say, oh, he is not humble.
Mhm.
Humble doesn't mean to make somebody else humble in front of you.
Yeah.
Humble means that you practice yourself.
Correct. Or when the other person is doing a mood thing, foolish things, stupid things, or irresponsible things, you have to use the sharp language with the hope that the person may change. Now, for someone to even change, the person must be intelligent. For example, in Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna drops his bows and arrows and says, I'm not fighting this. Okay. And Krishna essentially in Hindi, what we say, gali, it's like a swear words. When Krishna is saying, Kutasta Kashmalavidam, Anarya, Jushtamaswargyam. Anarya. Anarya is like somebody, a Arya would never accept the word, he being
Correct.
called Anarya. But that's what Krishna is calling him. He says, what kind of behavior is this?
He
Right?
says, Klabyam mas magama partha, even stronger word.
Yes, 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 yes. Klaibya, right?
And the other word he uses, avajananti mam muda,
Yes.
prakriti kriya marani gune karmani, ahankar vimudatma. So,
Yes.
so
There you go. There you
somebody
go. I mean,
says,
these are
yeah,
strong words.
very strong.
People don't understand because they don't understand Sanskrit.
Vimuda means even superlative of muda. And
Superlative of a stupid or foolish person, right?
muda means like person who is a brain of a root of a tree.
Yeah.
Literally, that means.
Yes. Yes.
So, and the trees eat from their feet. So they drink from their feet. So
Right.
Buddha is very, very strong word. Even
Yeah.
Murk is very small in front of that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Just like we were using, like somebody's brain is in the knees kind of thing, right? Literally, literally in
is
that
going
sense.
into the earth. So anyway, but the whole point is today we're talking about rights versus response. In America, the rights are considered the more important than responsibilities, and which is the big problem because the rights are finite, but responsibility is infinite. Rights. If I take a right, then the big political thing going on in human rights.
Hmm.
But first, you have to define who is a human and Manushya, like who follows Manu or who is made in the image of Manu. And Manu has very clearly delineated from the Vedic scriptures the rights of a human being as well as the responsibilities of a human being.
Yeah.
So, how important the karma becomes more important than the adhikar, right? Even though the only adhikar we have been given is karma, nothing
Yeah.
else we have been given.
Yeah.
So, what is your view on that, sir?
Well, I would say, see, if people start using again the words over a period of time, lose their meanings or they develop multiple meanings. That is true in any language. I mean, English, Sanskrit, Marathi, any language. But in the short term, I think it would also help instead of people using the words rights or my rights, they start using the word privilege. Then
Right.
suddenly they start understanding it's a privilege. It's not even a right. When you drive on the road, you have a privilege. Okay, you're lucky kind of thing, with certain registrations that you have done. You have a privilege to make use of that road. It's not your right, because you still have to follow the rules, which is the responsibilities. Okay, so yeah, that's what I think. And today what we'll do is, we have discussed this couple of times before. I thought, in a very short way, entertaining way, but very educational way, I would like to discuss that rights versus responsibilities for, say, Indic researchers, because that's remains my field. Okay, so that's what I thought I'll do today.
No, very good. Like, we can get started, Nilesh.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So let me start sharing, and let me know when you say it.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So rights versus responsibilities. And I thought, how would that apply to ancient Indian studies? Well, it will apply in many ways. But here is something that I would like to share with our audience. And if they like it, they can feel free to use it. Next to those, I have got names of two individuals, my very good friends. One is Bimal Trivedi, and another one is, that handle says Benedose, that refers to Dr. Shiva Shastri. And I know them for at least 8+ years. Okay, this is going back to the days of Bharat Rakshak Forum. The forum still exists, but since then, many other forums, social media forums, have come out, and they are more effective, more easy to access, and whatnot. So we tend to use likes of Twitter or Facebook, and also do some private communication. But Bimal Trivedi ji gave this very good, when we used to have these very wonderful discussions on subjects, all subjects. There was no limit to what subjects we would discuss. Anything under the sky was worthy of discussion if, and it is always worthy of discussion if many intelligent people come together. So it is his contribution where he says, the way, especially in the humanities research, the social studies research, and very much, unfortunately, because of that, to the Indic studies, what you will see is people will, combine perhaps. They will start with a perhaps, they will start with probably, it appears to them, it could be translated like this, and so on and so forth. And therefore, something is so. One of the one that, people have too much time on their hands, and they will do whatever the hell they want to write, and they say, therefore Nilesh is wrong. There is no correlation or connection between it. So this is one, perhaps and probably. And that's how the tomes, the books, and the big books are written in last 200-300 years about Indian history and destroying Indian history altogether. Then the second one comes from Dr. Shiva Shastri. I also love that, which is again, a number of you would have heard the phrase, and if you are taking certain courses in statistics and business courses, you would know this: the correlation, or science courses, the correlation is not causation. It could be causation, but we have to almost go and see if there is a sufficient evidence for causation. So many times people will take one correlation here, one correlation here, and then put it together and think it is a fact. Now, what I'm going to show you today is, guess what? Again, we talked about rights versus responsibilities. So you want the rights, but are you willing to take the outcome, which is your responsibility? Whatever you are exercising as your rights, it comes with outcome, and that is a responsibility. Can you claim that also? If not, you are a hypocrite. Okay. So here I'm going to show you something. This is going on with some of the discussion, Aditya, that you are aware, and we are glad that we have many other things to do and we don't spend much time. But in the spirit of education, educating the masses, educating the folks, this is very important to do it. What I have on the left side are the specific shlok verses from Valmiki Ramayana. And we don't need to, I'm going to give a quick, very short translation of it on the right side. Just from the story perspective, this is happening when Ram, Lakshman, and Sita are in Panchavati, okay, during the Vanvas time, which is in the modern day Nasik, in the central west state of India called Maharashtra, where the Godavari River emerges, just where begins right from that place. And that is where in the Panchavati, Ram, Lakshman, Sita are living. They're staying there. And the Rutu, Hemanta Rutu arrives. Hemanta Rutu, just so that people can put that in perspective. In our times, in the Northern Hemisphere, that refers to approximately the month of November and December. Okay. But that time it will be, of course, different. But that's a similar season, 2 months before the day of winter solstice. And Lakshman is describing this, the description of that season, and he's enjoying that season. I mean, it's very cold, but remember, I mean, those of us who have been to the northern parts of the United States or Canada, I mean, I lived in Canada, and yes, it's very cold, but with the snow falling and lots of snow, it's also fun, right? Now, what is interesting is at that time, this is going back 14,000 years. Actually, we are talking of even snowfall in the Nasik area, which almost never happens in these times. Okay, very rare instance that it will happen in winter. Quick crude translations I'm going to give for the verses on the left. So what is happening is Lakshman is describing the Hemanta season, okay, the autumn season. And how is he describing? If you look at this, he's starting with the sunrise. Okay, he's saying in this Rutu, in this Hemanta season, the autumn season, sun is rising in the southern direction. So we are in the northern hemisphere. If you follow around the north, see right now, what is the month? Like right now, we are in August. In 1 month's time, you will find sun is rising straight east. Okay. And as after 21st of September, as if you follow the rising place of the sun every day at whatever location you are, you will find it's going further south, further south, further south. And on 21st of December, it will be extreme south. So that's what Lakshman is referring to, is that the sun is rising in the southern direction. Okay. But it's still southeastern, but he's saying southern in the sense of during the east portion, it is in the southern direction. Okay, so where does this description begins? It begins with the sun rising. Then he's saying, well, the Himalayas are full of snow. Now, he may or may not be able to see Himalayas from Nasik, but remember, they have lived in the Ayodhya before, okay, closer to Himalayas, and he's aware of that site. So his Himalayas this time of the year will be full of snows. Then he goes on describing, he says, well, the time of the midday, finally, when the midday arrives, the weather becomes comfortable because it becomes finally warm. And the days are so small that he says, well, that's true, but as soon as the noon is over and sun tilts towards the western direction, the afternoons start becoming cooler. And then he's now talking about the sunset. Now, please pay attention to this, because this becomes the issue. Some people have made this a issue of a controversy. Okay, they think this translation is not correct. They give an alternate translation. We will look at both the translations. We will also look at how a specific particular shlok can have multiple translations. Okay, depending on individual's personal knowledge, personal point of view. And still, whatever translation you take, of course, some translations would be outright wrong, but there are probable translations, there are plausible translations, no matter what. But once you decide your translation, you must take responsibility for the outcome of that translation. And that is what I'm going to discuss today in terms of the rights and responsibilities. So the son of Hemanta, which is the verse here, I will say is Nivrutta Akasha Shayana. I'll just put my cursor here, this verse here. Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushanita Himaruna. Okay. Now, my translation, when I did this first translation, I did not refer to anyone in the first place. So this is my translation. Then the second translation I came across was Dr. P.V. Vartak. And interestingly, he had translated in the same ways. Then I had consulted multiple Sanskrit experts to see if this translation makes sense. And they said, well, yeah, I mean, this is a plausible translation. Of course, there can be other translations, and we'll look at that. So the son of Hemanta, which is son of Hemanta Rutu, retired, Nivrutta Akasha, as if it's going to sleep, Shayana, Nivrutta Akasha, meaning retiring from the sky, okay, setting from the sky. And where does it do? It says Pushanita, near Nakshatra Pusha. So in a simple language, the sun of this autumn season is setting near Nakshatra Pusha. This is very important, and we'll see what that is. But to continue the story, the description started with the sunrise. Then the Lakshman talks about the midday sun. Then Lakshman talks about the conditions in the afternoon. Then Lakshman talks about the setting sun. Now Lakshman gets into the descriptions of the night. Okay, and he's describing that even the moon. So naturally, most of the time, the importance or the prominence of the moon is through the night. Okay, that's when its beauty is seen. He says the moon is seen as a lustreless during this time, even on the full moon day. That is to say, the first, at least one full moon of the Hemanta season is already over. Okay, as a description. He says even the full moon day of the Hemanta season, the moonlight is not very bright. Okay, that's what he's saying. Then what happens? Then I have not translated those, so let's go here. And so full moon, this is Purnamasa, even the full moon is not bright. Then it starts talking about what is going through the night, how it is all cold, okay? And then it starts talking about the hours of the dawn, okay? Kale Dviguna, okay? In the morning times. And now what is happening? And if you go follow there further, there is a fog everywhere, Godhuma, everything, all this that you are saying. And now Shobhante Abhyudite Surya. And now again, you start seeing the dawn, and then the beautiful rising of the sun. Okay. And then the discussion of the morning times continue through these. Now, how suddenly the trees are becoming visible and cows are grazing. And there are, if you go a few other verses, you will see the descriptions of the morning. In effect, what Lakshman is doing is, to describe the Hemanta season, he starts with the morning sunrise and walks Ram and Sita through 24-hour cycle until the next dawn. Okay, that's what the reality is. Now, if you understand this, and that's why that the Vidya, Vinaya, comprehension comes into the picture, then now this is my work. Okay, so based on this, the lunar month of Pusha during the Hemanta, when does that occur? If we start from our time, and last time we did the foundations of archaeoastronomy, if you apply that, it's just a matter of thinking for like less than 2 minutes, and you will arrive at this particular time frame. That the latest time frame when the sun of Hemanta Rutu, the autumn season, set on the nakshatra Pushya would occur sometime between, say, 11,500 BC to 17,000, 17,500 BC. Okay, because sun has to be near nakshatra Pushya, and Hemanta season is for 2 months. Also, when Lakshman is saying that sun is setting on the Pushya nakshatra, it can also mean like sun sets, and the nakshatra that you can see now that the sky is visible with stars is a Pushya nakshatra. So that time period comes to sometime from 11,500 BC, which is what, more than 12,000 years ago, to more than 19,000 years ago. That would be the time of Ramayana based on this. Now, let's see what happens if you interpret this in a different fashion. And that's very important. So again, I'm taking this Nivrutta Akashashayana Pushyanita Himana. Okay. Now, if you go and look at the translations of various commentators of Valmiki Ramayana, Adityaji, what is funny is there is a reference to that Pushyanita, near Pushya. But I have seen, I mean, they are there in a public domain and everyone should go and look at them. Some translators, some commentators, some acharya, whoever it is, okay, with even a good knowledge of Sanskrit, but many times biased by their own personal biases or a lack of understanding of astronomy, what they have done, the range is so wide, it's just amazing. And I'm going to quickly walk you through and tell you what are the consequences of it. So you have a right to interpret these verses in a certain fashion, but guess what? As soon as you interpret, it leads to a certain conclusion, and one must take responsibility for that conclusion. So, for example, some commentator has read this verse and translated it, Adityaji, to mean this was a month of a Kartika. Surprise, surprise. I mean, we are talking of a Pushya, near Pushya. Why are you saying month of a Kartika? I don't think they have given the explanation why they said Kartika, but leave it aside. I'm going to come back. Some other commentators have looked at the same verse and have said, oh, this refers to the month of Margashirsha. Aha, whatever the reason, somebody says Kartik, other person says Margashirsha. Very nice. Now we have quite a few commentators who have also said, oh, it is, because they got the word Pushya, they're saying, well, this means the Hemanta Rutu was occurring during the lunar month of Pushya. Okay, now the fun begins. So let's start with the Kartika, Margashirsha, and we'll come to Pushya. So if the translation or interpretation can be taken of these words to mean this refers to the time of a Kartika month, guess what? In our times, right now, okay, every one of us, when we are living, last 100 years, 200, 300 years, and future few hundred years, the lunar month of Kartik occurs during the Hemanta season. So then that person must accept and explain and justify and show with a common sense how Ramayana, that all that we're discussing, the historical event, is happening in our times. It's like we should go to Ayodhya to see Rama as if, So people very carelessly, casually, and sometime out of ignorance, or I would say innocence, we can give them a benefit of doubt, will translate something, but will not bother to see what is the implication of their translation. And where comes the question of they taking responsibility if they cannot even understand what is the implication of their translation. Now, if you take Margashirsha, what happens? The scenario remains the same. Right now, Kartik comes as a first month of Hemanta season, and Margashirsha comes as a second month of Hemanta season. So Margashirsha, typically the day of winter solstice comes in the month of Margashirsha. So that's the second month of Hemanta season. And so what does that mean? Again, it means as if Ramayana happened in our times. Now, we know that that is not true. Okay. Or if they think that that is true, then they should come out and explain, hey, guess what, guys? You are all fools. Ramayana is actually happening in our times. Or what about Mahabharata? Oh, it is going to happen in future. I mean, they have to understand the ridiculous nature of the outcomes they are deriving from their translation. This should make them stop in their tracks and says, could I be wrong? But no, sometime, their little knowledge, of course, Aditya ji will love this. Professor Ashwath Damodaran, he's an electrical engineer, IITian, but he works in a finance field in New York. Very famous professor at the business school. People will line up. I mean, when I worked for some of the corporations, I have worked with him. We have worked not directly with him. We have hired him to teach our folks, about doing the valuation of the companies and whatnot. And he will say, finance is such a field where little knowledge goes a long way. Frankly, I would say that applies to any field. If you have a genuine knowledge, a very good knowledge, actually it does go a long way. But some people will not even realize that, and they can use their little or whatever not so little knowledge they have and reach a wrong conclusion. So if it's a month of Kartik, that means Ramayana happened this time. It's a very ridiculous conclusion. It's foolish conclusion. If somebody interprets this line referring to Margashirsha, that also means as if Ramayana happened in our times. It is equally foolish conclusion, and it should make them stop in their tracks and think, what are they saying? Well, let's extend this to some of the Twitter and Facebook and Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad controversy and all the humorous stuff that goes on there. Some people, again, a few translators before have done this too. They will say that Nivrutta Akashashayana Pushnita Himaruna refers to the lunar month of Pusha. First thing, if you understand this description to be the descriptions of the Hemanta Rutu, a 24-hour day, description beginning with the early morning, sunrise, then noon, afternoon, evening, sunset, then night, and all the way to the next day's morning, then you will not interpret, you will not translate it this way. But suppose if you translate, somebody says, hey, that's my right. Whichever way I want to translate, it is my right. We are talking about rights and responsibilities here. It is my privilege, the person will say. Okay, so they translate this to mean it's the lunar month of Pusha during Hemanta. Fine, be my guest. Now, do you know what is the implication of it? Immediate, instantaneous implication, only assuming you understand some basic astronomy, the fundamentals of archaeoastronomy, is this. If you say that this time refers to the lunar month of Pusha during Hemanta season, it means the earliest occurrence of it, starting with our times and going backwards in antiquity, occurred, the latest, I should say, is the between 500 BC to 5000 BC. So remember that time frame. My time frame is the one given at the above, 11,500 through 17,500. Okay, and I stand by that, and I have shown how like close to 600 plus specific astronomy descriptions, astronomy observations come together like solving a jigsaw puzzle, solving a crossword puzzle, and take us to 12,209 BC. Now, if somebody claims some other translation such as this, it's an onus on them not to just give a translation in a very careless, casual manner and just run away. Okay, because you are doing this in the context of something such as finding the timing of Ramayana, which hardly anyone has figured it out. There are maximum of 12 claims, and I would encourage all of you to read those claims and see how ridiculous are some of the argumentation in those claims. Okay, so somebody makes a claim that is lunar month of Pusha, immediately the conclusion is that whether they like it or not, whether they have a comprehension of astronomy or not, that the time duration they're talking is 500 BC to 5000 BC. Okay, but we are not done. Now, this same group, especially what's happening in the Twitter, Facebook world, and the Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad, one Google discussion group, is this. They will also pull another shlok, another verse from Valmiki Ramayana. And we can congratulate them for doing this. At least they are taking some efforts rather than just opening their mouth and talking something. So they are going and finding this. Now, if they study my works, not just the books, but my videos, my blogs, okay, and my social media posts, they will find that all these astronomy observations I have given out. They are out there in the public domain, all 300 plus for Mahabharata, all close to 600 plus for Ramayana in the public domain, in Facebook and in Twitter and in my books and in my blogs and in my videos. And guess what? They don't have to take my word. They can start reading the Mahabharata text itself, and they can start reading the Valmiki Ramayana. So one other verse that they feel very emotional about it. So I'm going to show that to you. Here, this is the season now before. So now we talked about the Ram Lakshman in Nashik, in Panchoti. Now, now what is happening is now Sita was taken away by Ravana. Now Ram and Lakshman are searching for Sita. Okay, and when they are searching for Sita, this is what Ram is saying to Lakshman. He's saying, I see, I am Vasanta. Okay, for example, I am Vasanta. This is now the season of Vasanta Rutu. Okay, and hey Saumitre, meaning hey Lakshmana, and then he is discussing his emotional situation because Sita has been taken away from him. Okay, so he says, how am I feeling? And in that description, he's feeling, although this is a beautiful month of Vasanta, okay, and the wind of a Chaitra, that last word there, Chaitra, Krura Chaitra Vana Anila, okay, the forest wind of a Chaitra, or forest wind like that of a Chaitra, but I'll not go into that translation. I'll go with their translation right now. So they're saying it's a season of a Vasanta, Adityaji, pay attention, and it is a lunar month of a Chaitra. Now, if they do that, immediately what does that mean? That means, remember, actually that translation is correct, although let me go on the record and say that that is not the only translation. If you read Valmiki Ramayana carefully, the entire Valmiki Ramayana carefully, and you understand the timing of Ramayana, then you can actually come up with a more meaningful, different interpretation for this. Okay. But I'm saying let's keep that aside. Because if people cannot even understand my basic arguments in my book, they cannot understand the theories. They don't even understand what theory means. They don't understand what the statement of a theory means. Forget about they're trying to understand some subtle interpretations in a context of the Ramayana. But so let's go with their translation. So what they're saying is, hey, Ramayana is talking of the Vasanta Rutu, and that occurred at the time when the lunar month of Chaitra occurred during Vasanta Rutu. Fine, I would say, second time, be my guest. If that's the translation, okay, that's your right to translate it that way. That's your privilege to translate it that way. It comes with a responsibility. Are you ready? What is the responsibility? It leads directly, assuming you understand astronomy and the very basics of astronomy and archaeoastronomy, it leads you to this conclusion that the Chaitra in Vasanta, as far as the latest incident of that is concerned, that happened right in our times. It is happening now. Was it happening in the past? Yes, it's happening for last 2000 years. Or if you really stretch the limit, you can say it's happening for last 4000 years. So say from 2000 BC to our times, and it will continue for additional 500, 600 years, maybe 2600 BC, 2600 C and so on. So you are taking one selective statement of Valmiki Ramayana. You are saying, hey, it's my right. I know how to translate. It's my privilege. I'm translating it. Okay, be my guest. That's the responsibility. The responsibility is that whether you understand it or not, whether you understand astronomy or not, as soon as you say the statement, the conclusion is that Chaitra in Vasanta, that means you are saying that Ramayana happened sometime between 2000 BC and 2400 CE. Now, let's combine that with the other translation, the other alternate translation coming from the same group. And what are they saying? They're saying, hold on, this is not sun setting near Nakshatra Pushya during the Hemanta season, as Nilesh Oak claims, but it is for them, it happening during the lunar month of Pushya. I would say, fine, it's your right, it's your privilege, be my guest. Now, as soon as you do that, it comes with a responsibility. What is the responsibility? If you take that meaning, that means, according to you, whether you understand it or not, whether you mean it or not, that's the natural. That's how science works, guys. That's how Jnana works. That's how Vijnana works. That's how Shastra works. That's how Shastrartha works. So lunar month of Pushya during Hemanta, it would mean it occurs during 500 BC to 5000 BC. Now, for these both statements to be true, and these are the two statements quoted by these individuals. Okay, so if these both statements are true, now remember we have to take the overlapping time period. Okay, the inference would mean in this case that is the responsibility that is on their head, whether whether they realize it or not. And what is that responsibility? The responsibility that essentially they are claiming that Ramayana occurred sometime during 500 BCE to 2000 BCE. Okay, and therefore I had written one post recently. I said, any takers? Okay, because what is this time period? Based on enormous research that is being done, okay, I mean, first thing, this time period has so many problems. I wouldn't know even where to start. In fact, I would not bother even critiquing this kind of thing. Okay, it's a waste of time. Okay, on every front. First thing, every person who has come up with the date of Mahabharata, that is, say, 2000 BC or before, should have a problem with these interpretations, because these guys are saying Ramayana happened after 2000 BCE, that is after Mahabharata. And Aditya, I'm sure you have met few individuals in your walks of life, just like I have. Okay, I mean, they have a right to believe whatever they want to believe. I don't want to waste my time with them. So that's the first problem. Saraswati River is a problem. I mean, everything is a problem for this. But what is, if they have a skin in the game, what they should do is they say, here is the verse from Ramayana, here is another verse from Ramayana, here is the correct translation as they see it, here is the correct translation as they see it, here is the implication of that translation, here is another implication of that translation. And if we combine those two, the implication is that Ramayana happened sometime between 500 BC to 2000 BC, and they have to just communicate that to people. And if they are willing to take that responsibility and they study further and come up with the specific years for the year of Ramayana, and then they want to see, this is not like I'm not interested in wasting time with folks who don't understand some of the basics of how to do scientific research. But if they are willing, and in the interest of the Indic narrative, in the interest of creating the growth of Indic narrative, Indic discussions, Samvad and Vad, I am always willing to do open debate. And we can do this on a Sattology, very much on a Sattology. Okay. But this is the conclusion of what their translations are. So on the left side, they have their rights and privileges, how they choose to translate those verses. And I'm not saying they are necessarily wrong. The second case, they are very much wrong. The first case, like Vasantana Chaitra, prima facie, on the face value, their translation is correct. Okay, actually, there are a few more verses that I can actually show them that they will go like this. But then there are hundreds of other verses that will go exactly opposite of what they are claiming. Okay, and that's where the Vijnana Buddhi is required. The logic, the science, the science of logical reasoning is also required, and how we bring all the evidence together. So rights is fine, but you cannot just say, I will have a right, I will have a privilege, and you can ignore the responsibilities. No, the circumstances will not let you ignore the responsibilities. And that is the beauty, how Maharishi Valmiki or Maharishi Vyasa have encoded the wisdom, okay, the Vedic wisdom to these epics. Therefore, Mahabharata, I mean, we naturally say it's a Pancham Veda. But when we look at the purpose of the Itihasa is to what? Is to make people understand the complex philosophy of the Vedas. And how is it done? Of course, with the help of epics like Itihasa, and also the Vedangas. And one of the Vedanga, I mean, there is a Shiksha, Vyakran, Nirukta, okay, and people talk about all of this. They should talk about it because each of this is important. Many times they forget the Jyotish, which is one of the six Vedangas, because the Jyotish is there for a reason, and therefore not a surprise that the astronomy references, they occur in the Vedas, but they also occurs in the epics. So with that, I'm going to stop, Aditya ji. Let's see if we have any questions that we can take. And if not, if you have any questions, but otherwise we can stop.
So one of the question comes from audience is that why, now it is a question that you and I have spoken many times. The Are Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and other all these isms a later addition to the Sanatan Dharma faith? My answer is yes, but I want to hear your answer.
Okay, and you want to hear my answer first?
Yes.
Okay,
My answer
I would
is
say,
yes. Yes.
uh
My
yeah,
answer is yes. Yeah.
your answer is yes. That they came later, right?
Yes.
Okay, I would say the ism part came later. That's what I would say. The ism. Okay. Now, see the yesterday there was another interesting discussion, and it's very relevant to this. I will say somewhere I had given an interview. I think I forgot the name now, but the Chitti media, and where I'm discussing the difference between, say, Abrahamic religions, and I'll come back to this ism in a minute, Abrahamic religions versus the Sanatan Dharma. And I said, quoting Joseph Campbell, I said, he has described the Abrahamic religions beautifully, where he said Judaism can be thought of as a religion of the chosen people of the God, the Bible as a, the Christianity as a salvation through community. I mean, yes, they will talk about Jesus, but as much as the emphasis is put modern days on the Jesus, it's more about the community. And if you talk of Islam, it is the focus on the book, like the Quran. Now, in that context, I said that you can think of the Sanatan Vedic Dharma as a, if you want to think, it's not a religion in a traditional sense, truly, but if you want to think for a practical comparison, it can be seen as a religion of a library and not just any individual book or any individual guru or something like this, okay? Any individual person. Now, let me come back to, is the Shaivism, Vaishnavism got added? Yes, I so Aditya, I'll agree. I'll agree on that later part, that ism, as a like a cult of certain kind, or as a this versus that, a binary kind of distinction, that definitely came later. For example, take let's go back 7,500 years to Mahabharata times, and what you find is, not many people know this because they don't read Mahabharata, is that Krishna has taken a Shaivi Diksha. Okay, Krishna has taken a Shaivi Diksha. In fact, that's how he's attributed to some of the weapons and some of the skills that he has. For example, he's showing a Vishwarup Darshan. Even Duryodhana criticizes him once, But if you go back, you see that because he has taken a Shaivi Diksha. Every time he wanted to have a great son, his wife or one of his wives, they send him to do a tapasya and do the prayer and tapasya to Shiva. Okay, so before Aniruddha is born, Rukmini sends him to do tapasya for 12 years. Okay, tapasya for Shiva, and so on. What to speak? I mean, so when you say later, I don't know, Aditya, what you mean. When is that later? But let's talk just the Mahabharata time, 7,500 years ago, more than 7,500 years ago, right in the Anushasan Parva, which is the discussion between Bhishmacharya and Yudhishthira. When the discussion comes to Shiva and Vishnu, and Yudhishthira asks Bhishmacharya about that, and Bhishmacharya says, I'm not qualified to explain you the glory of a Shiva. But he says, I know someone who is qualified to describe the glory of Shiva. And do you know who Bhishmacharya points to? Bhishmacharya points to Bhagwan Krishna. And then that is when Bhagwan Krishna discusses his experience, his tapasya of a Shiva, his initiation into Shaiva, and I wouldn't call Shaivaism because there is no ism, okay? And then Krishna recites the 1,008 names of Shiva. Then Yudhishthira wants to hear 1,000 names of Vishnu. And then Krishna points to Bhishmacharya, and that's the beauty. That is the exchange between bhaktas, okay? Exchange between devotee and Bhagwan, and that wonderful exchange which we see referred to in the Bhagavad Gita, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, okay? Or Tushyanti cha Ramanti cha, some of those. So now Krishna tells Bhishma, and Bhishma now recites the Vishnu Sahasranam. So if we go to Mahabharata times, I can definitely say that there was no these isms. And I'll give it back to you, Aditya ji, for your insightful additions.
No, you actually stole the words from me.
Oh, did
So
I?
this is exactly what this is the in that samvad, and it is so interesting that it is Krishna who asks Arjun to do Durga Stuti before the Mahabharata war starts.
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
so here, so So there is a complete cooperation, and there is no need to fight on whether you are a Vaishnav or a Shaiva or Shakti, because all three are, in fact, Durga is called the younger sister of Krishna. Krishna Arjuna,
Mhm.
Krishna
Yeah.
Arjuna,
Yeah.
Anuja of Krishna, Gopa Anuja. That is one of her names.
Mm.
And so all these things are added much later on to divide,
Mm.
especially Max Muller. Max Muller wrote the word Shaivites and Vaishnavites, and but that is not the case, because the focus is on Brahma, that
Mm.
everyone should get Brahma Gyan. Brahma Gyan means
Mm.
spiritual knowledge about ourselves and about the nature of Krishna or Vishnu. And that is a thing, and there is a complete cooperation in when people say Mahadev is better because Krishna is worshipping or giving his names. Obviously, when you go to Krishna, Krishna will say, even you are better than me. He's a very humble person. He'll say, you are better than me.
Yeah.
So it if you ask somebody very knowledgeable, any sadhu, and you go and say that okay, I feel I'm better than you, he said, yes, I'll sign a certificate also that you are
Yes.
definitely better than me.
Yeah.
So the more focus has to be on spirituality or adhyatma within ourselves,
Yeah.
not on the basis of Western literatures, because most of the Western literatures, they create division, Shaivism. And also there is another example also, Shukracharya's ashram. Some
Mm.
people are worshipping, Shukracharya is of Danavas, guru of Danava.
Mm. Yeah.
Some people are worshipping Shiva, some people are worshipping Shakti, some people are worshipping
Yeah.
Vishnu. It
Mm.
doesn't matter. In the Pandavas were all carrying Krishnamurti, small Kunti had given them. Kunti
Yeah.
says,
Mm.
but it doesn't stop Yudhishthir to worship Suryadev, because
Correct.
Dhamma Rishi told him to worship Suryadev for the you that Akshay Patra.
Right.
So there is a complete harmony there, and Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains everything, but he also tells about his own nature
Right.
also. But that is out of deep humility to give us the information.
Correct. And so, therefore, now if somebody goes and asks the Shiva, like I think Parvati asked the Shiva, right? And then Shiva says, Aradhananam Sarvesham Vishnu Aradhana Param, right? Again, each of these needs to be understood in the context, which means you
Context.
need a Vivek, Vivekadnyan to
Yes.
understand in the context. If you take it as a prima facie, like just a face value, um, sometimes you may be lucky and you might end up with the right meaning. Many times you will lose the meaning that is between the lines.
That's right.
That is not written there, but you are expected to understand it.
Yeah. Like you go to, some people say he got it from Agni, so Agni is superior.
Hmm.
It is the nature of Devta to give weapons on earth. Manusya
Hmm.
experience, Devtas have to give the weapons and it
Yeah.
comes through. It doesn't mean that Bhagwan cannot get it on his own. Like Pashupati Astra, Arjuna also gets, and Sri Ram also gets. Both of them get the same Astra.
Yeah.
But both of them, the giver is Shivji. But the relationship is of love, where
Yeah.
Shivji.
It's like when my mother still writes letters, and she writes the letters in poetry too. Many times the poetry will run for a few pages. But it's the local postman who delivers that poetry to me.
That's right.
My mother's message. So similarly, that Agni has a specific purpose. When Agni gave something, when Indra gave something, it is the messengers.
And in that very famous incident where Arjun and Krishna are fighting in
Hmm.
that forest, Khandav forest,
Hmm.
when that incident it happens,
Hmm.
there the Maidanav is left alive, and
Hmm.
Krishna wants to kill him.
Yeah.
Arjuna wants to save him because he has taken shelter of Arjun. And then after he's defeated, Arjun asks him, "You ask Krishna for saving your life."
Hmm.
And Krishna says, "Okay, if you want to do something for Yudhishthir." And
Hmm.
that's how the palace was built.
Mayasabha. That's how
Yes,
Mayasabha came into being.
that's
Yeah.
how Maisava. So it's a complete coordination. And also the Skand story.
Hmm.
The Skand appearance of Skand has Agni,
Yes.
Surya, Shivji, Parvati. Four people involved. Plus
Yes.
Kritika.
Yeah.
Six
And
Kritika.
and Indra, there is a Indra in the discussion too.
Indra is a discussion too.
Indriya itself. Yeah.
Another example is like the Indra comes down, and it's in the book which you wrote the foreword for me, the small book. But the
You always tease me on that.
It's a 350-page small book.
You should say that. What? How many pages, by the way? The One Arrow
350.
book. Huh?
350.
350. And you should say, well, by the way, Nilesh Oak thinks that it's a small book. 350
Yes.
pages.
So in the small book, One Arrow, One Kill. It's very, and it is from Valmiki Ramayana, so people can refer back also. So Shatbringa Rishi, Indra is standing in front. Sri Ram comes there, and Sri Ram is telling Lakshman, "Look at the glory of Indra. How beautiful he is looking." Okay? And Indra says, "I will meet him." Shatbringa says, "Meet Sri Ram," because he was waiting for Sri Ram to leave his body. And like to go to Swargaloka in the same body. Shatbringa also went in the same body. He says, "I will first serve Sri Ram, then go." And he asked Indra, "Would you like to meet?" He said, "Abhi samay nahi." He said, "There's no time right now. In the right time, I'll meet him." That doesn't mean Indra was disrespectful, but that was the time of the Deva.
Right.
They work according to the clock. So a lot of these things. So definitely the answer is Shaivism, Vaishnavism. The ism, like Nilesh said correctly, is a later addition. And in Sanatana Dharma, whether you worship Shakti, if you do the proper way, the destination is one.
Yes.
But if you try to just say that one is better than the other, then the destination is nowhere.
Then the problem begins, the problem that cannot be solved.
All right. Thank you so much, Nireshji. A learning session for me and also a great learning session for others. Namaste.
Thank you.